My name is Ava Carter, and I'm 35. I was in the middle of arranging a platter of cookies for our annual summer kickoff party, the scent of chocolate chip filling our kitchen, when a call from my mother shattered the afternoon's peace. "Don't bring Leo to the party on Saturday," she said, her voice clipped and devoid of warmth. "Isabel wants everything to be picture perfect, and you know how unpredictable he can be." The words landed like shards of glass, shattering the warm, festive feeling that had filled the room moments before. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, as a memory from last year's family dinner flashed in my mind, my father's face red with anger as Leo, overwhelmed by the noise, began to cry. "Get him under control," he had hissed across the table. I wanted to scream at her, to demand what gave them the right to exclude my son from a family event. But years of being the family peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over every conflict, weighed me down. "I understand," I choked out, the lie tasting like acid. I hung up, my hands trembling. My husband, Mark, was watching me from across the room. I could see the questions forming in his eyes, but I just offered a brittle smile for our kids, Chloe and Leo. There was no way we were going to that party in Oakwood now. That phone call had made the decision for us. My mother's command wasn't just about one afternoon. It was a line in the sand, a boundary I'd felt them drawing for years, but had never been forced to confront so starkly. I put the kids to bed that night, their innocent laughter a painful counterpoint to the hollow ache in my chest. I wouldn't let them see me crumble, but as I sat alone in the darkened living room, her words played on a relentless loop in my head, and I knew this was just the beginning. Something was about to break, and it would change the entire foundation of our lives. Have you ever been told you or a loved one weren't welcome for reasons that felt unjust and cruel? Let me know in the comments. Share your experience or how you navigated it, because you need to stay with me for this. What happened later that night at precisely 2:15 a.m. would change everything forever. At 2:15 a.m., my phone began to vibrate incessantly on the nightstand, its screen a blinding beacon in the dark. It wouldn't stop. The screen was a frantic mess of notifications, 42 missed calls, and a flood of texts from Eleanor, Isabel, and Nathan, all piling up like an impending avalanche. A video call had been missed, and a single voicemail from my father, Richard, waited, marked with an urgent red exclamation point. My stomach coiled into a tight, sick knot as I pressed play. At 37 seconds in, his voice, thick and slurred with alcohol, sliced through the silence. "Leo wrecked last year's dinner with all that racket. Why can't you be considerate for once and just leave him at home?" The words were a gut punch, a raw and unfiltered confession of a prejudice I had spent years pretending didn't exist. I stood frozen in the middle of our Oakwood bedroom, the silence that followed his voice more deafening than any sound. I hit replay, and each syllable landed with even more brutal clarity. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, hard rage that was beginning to smolder inside me. Mark stirred beside me, his eyes narrowing in the dim light as I whispered the content of the message. "He said what?" he snapped, his voice a low, jagged thing. He reached for his own phone, already preparing to dial my father's number and unleash the fury I was trying to contain. I placed my hand on his arm, shaking my head. "Not now," I said, my throat so tight the words barely came out. We couldn't wake the children, not with this kind of poison seeping through the walls. But it was too late. Our daughter, Chloe, was already there, a small silhouette in her pajamas at the edge of the hallway. Her quiet voice cut through the tense air. "Why does Grandpa not want Leo around?" My heart felt like it stopped beating. She had heard enough, her wide, innocent eyes searching my face for an explanation I couldn't give. I knelt down, pulling her into a hug that felt more for me than for her, and I lied. "He's just tired and grumpy, sweetie." But her question was a spark that ignited a wildfire inside me. I would not let my son grow up bearing the weight of this family's rejection, not for one more day. I paced the floor, ignoring the insistent buzzing of my phone. I saw Isabel's name flash on the screen, and I just knew she was probably already in damage control mode, trying to protect the flawless family image she worked so hard to maintain. Eleanor's calls were about control, her desperate need to orchestrate every family interaction, and Nathan, my brother, was likely trying to play his usual role as the family mediator, urging me to let it go for the sake of a false peace. I didn't answer a single one. Their voices had no place in my head, not after the blade my father had so carelessly wielded. That missed video call was probably a drunken mistake, a sloppy attempt at a group confrontation. I let it remain unanswered. My entire focus was on Leo, sleeping peacefully in his room, completely unaware of the venom directed at him. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, his own anger a simmering pot. "They've gone too far this time, Ava," he said, his jaw set. "We can't just let this go." I nodded, my mind a chaotic whirlwind. The memory of last year's dinner came rushing back in vivid detail. Leo's panicked cries when the sheer number of people became too much for him. My father's dark scowl as he muttered for us to just take him and leave. At the time, I had brushed it off, blaming myself for not anticipating his sensory overload. But now, hearing the raw disdain in my father's voicemail, I saw it for what it truly was. It was a deep-seated prejudice, as simple and ugly as that. My son was not a disruption. He was a child. He was our child. And I was going to fight for him. I found a notebook and a pen, my hands still unsteady. I needed a strategy, a way to build a fortress around Leo to protect him from the toxicity of our own family. Mark's first instinct was to cut them off completely, a clean and final break. But that felt too easy. I wanted them to confront what they had done, to look at the damage their words and actions had caused. My sister's entitled demands, my mother's cold justifications, and my father's drunken truth. They would all be held accountable. Chloe's question echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the stakes. Our daughter deserved to see her parents stand up for what was right, not cower to preserve a fragile, broken peace. I sat at the kitchen table as the first light of dawn broke, the phone finally silent. The calls had ceased, but their weight remained, pressing down on me. I thought about Leo's infectious laugh, the small but monumental victories he achieved in his therapy sessions, the way he would wrap his arms around me in a sudden, fierce hug. He did not deserve their contempt. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but I would make them understand that. Mark came and stood behind me, squeezing my shoulder in a silent promise of his unwavering support. I closed the notebook, my resolve hardening into something sharp and unbreakable. This was no longer about a single canceled party. This was about rewriting the definition of family on our own terms. That night, sleep was an impossibility. I found myself pulling out the old family albums, the heavy leather covers cool beneath my fingers. I sat on the living room floor in our Oakwood home, the moonlight casting long shadows across the pages. As I turned page after page, a horrifying pattern began to emerge, something I had been blind to for years. Our son, Leo, was always on the periphery. In a picture from a family picnic, he was a lonely, slightly blurred figure at the edge of the frame, while the rest of us were a cluster of bright, centered smiles. My chest tightened with a painful recognition. These weren't just poorly framed shots. They were deliberate choices, silent acts of rejection immortalized in glossy 4x6 prints. I flipped through the pages faster, my eyes now frantically scanning for my son. A Christmas photo from 2 years ago showed the entire family gathered around the tree, but Leo was nowhere to be seen, even though I vividly remembered him being there, clinging nervously to my hand. My sister, Isabel, had insisted on a proper group photo that day, gently but firmly nudging him out of the shot. Her voice from a conversation we'd had echoed in my memory, sharp and clinical. "Have you ever considered a specialized school for him, Ava? It would just be..." Easier. Easier for whom? I had deflected the comment back then, but now it felt like a twist of a knife. Isabel's suggestions weren't offers of help. They were attempts to edit Leo out of our family's public narrative. My mother's words cut just as deeply. At a summer barbecue 3 years prior, she had pulled me aside, her tone deceptively gentle. "You are just so blessed with Chloe." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Leo was the counterweight to that blessing, the unlucky hand I'd been dealt. I had smiled, nodded, and swallowed the hurt. But looking at these photos now, her preference was glaringly obvious. Every frame seemed to scream the same message. My son was not wanted. My hand trembled as I shut the album, the collective weight of those moments settling in my gut like a cold, heavy stone. Mark found me there, still on the floor, the album in my lap. "We could have our own party," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Just us. Invite people who actually care." The idea was a comforting balm, a fantasy of starting fresh and cutting out the poison. But I needed more than just a clean break. I needed to understand the why. Why did my own family look at my beautiful son and see a problem to be managed? Why had they spent years constructing this invisible wall around him, brick by subtle brick? I couldn't just walk away without confronting the source of the rot. I reached for the same notebook I had grabbed after my father's voicemail. My pen flew across the page, my hand now steady with purpose. I listed every slight, every backhanded compliment, every dismissive gesture that I had let slide. Isabel's push for a special school wasn't a one-time comment. She'd brought it up at Easter and then again at a cousin's wedding. My mother's remark about being blessed with Chloe had been met with knowing nods from my aunts, their silence a chorus of agreement. Even the small things began to form a larger picture. Leo's Christmas gifts were always less thought out. His seat was always placed at the far end of the dinner table. I wrote until my wrist ached, filling pages with the evidence of a pattern I had been too desperate for peace to see. The truth was brutal. This wasn't about one cruel voicemail or one rejected invitation. It was a quiet, insidious campaign to push my son to the margins of his own family. They hadn't just excluded him from a party, they had been excluding him his entire life. I thought of Chloe, her innocent question still hanging in the air. Why does Grandpa not want Leo around? She had felt it too, this constant low-frequency hum of rejection. I couldn't let her grow up believing this was normal, that it was acceptable for her brother to be treated as less than. I paused, staring down at the notebook. Each entry was a fresh wound, but together they formed a map. These were not random acts of thoughtlessness. They followed a twisted logic, one rooted in their discomfort with Leo's differences, his occasional meltdowns, his rigid need for routine, his moments of silent, intense focus. None of it fit with my family's curated image of polished perfection. Isabel needed her flawless gatherings. My mother craved a storybook legacy. They had collectively decided that Leo didn't fit, and I, in my desire to keep the peace, had allowed it to happen. No more. Mark sat beside me, reading over my shoulder. "This is a lot," he said, his voice low and heavy. "What's our next move?" I didn't have a complete battle plan yet, but the notebook felt like a weapon. It wasn't just a journal of my pain anymore. It was evidence. It was my tool to hold them accountable. I thought of Leo, sleeping soundly upstairs, his small body curled beneath his favorite blanket. He deserved a family that truly saw him, not one that systematically cropped him out of their lives. I had been silent for too long, always smoothing the rough edges to maintain a hollow peace. That was over. I closed the notebook, my resolve sharper and colder than steel. This wasn't about trying to fix my broken family. It was about protecting mine. Leo, Chloe, Mark. They were my center. The album and these written pages had shown me exactly what I was up against. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make sure my son's place in this world was immovable and undeniable. My family's choices would no longer define him. I would. One Wednesday evening, my friend Sarah practically ambushed me at a coffee shop. She had been texting me for days about a parent support group that met in the Oakwood Community Library. "You have to go, Ava," she'd insisted, her voice firm but kind. "You need this." I was hesitant, my stomach clenching at the thought of unpacking my family's ugly secrets for a room full of strangers. The notebook, filled with their documented slights, felt like a private burden, and sharing it felt like a profound betrayal, no matter how justified. But Sarah's persistence was a force of nature, and I finally relented, secretly hoping for a legitimate excuse to leave early. The library's meeting room had the comforting scent of coffee and old paper. A circle of mismatched chairs held about a dozen other parents, their faces etched with a familiar combination of exhaustion and resilience. I stayed near the door, clutching my purse like a shield. Sarah gave me a gentle nudge forward, whispering, "Just listen." The group was led by two men, James and David. James was a quiet man with tired, kind eyes, while David had a smile that seemed a bit too bright, a defense mechanism I recognized. They were parents themselves, navigating the same choppy waters with children who didn't fit neatly into the world's boxes. I sat down, my entire body tensed, ready to flee at a moment's notice. James spoke first, and his story dismantled my defenses piece by piece. His own daughter, he shared, had faced years of rejection from his side of the family because of her behavioral challenges. "I stayed quiet for a long time," he said, his voice steady but layered with old pain. "I thought I was protecting her, but silence just made it seem like she was the one to blame." His words landed with the force of a truth I had been actively avoiding. When we stay quiet, our children are the ones who pay the price. I gripped the arms of my chair, a lump forming in my throat. David nodded in agreement, sharing his own story of losing contact with his sister after he finally stood up for his son's needs at a family gathering. Their raw honesty cracked open something inside me, a wall I had carefully constructed to contain my own grief and anger. Sarah squeezed my hand, her eyes encouraging me to speak. I resisted at first, the weight of my mother's demands and my father's cruel words still a fresh wound. But the atmosphere in the room was one of profound safety, their stories a mirror of my own. I took a deep, shaky breath. "My family told me not to bring my son to their annual summer party," I began. The words started as a trickle and then became a flood. I told them about my mother's call, the explicit ban, and my father's drunken voicemail that blamed my 5-year-old son for ruining a dinner. I didn't use their names. Eleanor and Richard felt like phantoms in the room, but I laid their actions bare. I spoke about Leo, about his brilliant light and his small joys, and how the people who were supposed to love him most had systematically tried to extinguish it. The group listened, their nods of understanding and quiet murmurs of support, a balm to my frayed nerves. James leaned forward, his gaze direct and compassionate. "You're not alone in this," he said simply. David added, "Finding your voice is the first real step." In that moment, I felt a physical lightening, as if I had set down a heavy burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. For the first time, I wasn't just a daughter caught in a web of toxic family dynamics. I was a mother, fighting for her child. The shame I had harbored for my years of passive compliance began to dissipate, replaced by a flickering spark of purpose. We broke for coffee, and to my own surprise, I stayed. Sarah was chatting with David, her laughter a sound I hadn't heard from her in my presence for weeks. I approached James, needing more of his hard-won clarity. "How do you keep fighting?" I asked him. He shrugged, a faint, weary smile on his face. "You start by telling your story. You let others learn from your fight." His words lodged themselves in my mind, planting a seed. I had spent weeks seething, filling my notebook with my rage. But what if that story, that pain, could be transformed into something useful? What if it could help other families, other children like Leo? When the group reconvened, we talked about strategies, how to have difficult conversations with relatives, how to advocate for our children in schools and in public without completely incinerating relationships. I scribbled notes, my pen moving with a newfound urgency. One woman spoke about a community art project she'd organized to raise awareness. I listened intently, my mind racing. Leo deserved a world that didn't just tolerate him, but celebrated him. And maybe, just maybe, I could help build a small piece of that world. Not just for him, but for every child who had ever been pushed to the margins. Driving home, Sarah was grinning, clearly sensing the shift in me. "Told you it would help," she said. I just nodded, my thoughts swirling around James's story and the unexpected warmth of that circle of strangers. I had walked into that library expecting judgment and found an army instead. My family's rejection still stung, but it was no longer the only narrative. I could write a new one where Leo's place in the world was non-negotiable. The notebook in my bag felt different now. It was no longer just a catalog of pain, but a blueprint for change. I pulled into my driveway, the Oakwood night still and quiet around us. Mark was waiting up, his expression searching my face for a verdict. I told him everything, about the group, about James's words, about the radical idea of using our own painful story to help others. He listened, his hand covering mine, and I knew without a doubt that he was with me. Leo and Chloe were asleep, their futures a vast, unwritten page. I wasn't ready to forgive my family, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I felt ready to move forward. Their choices would not be the anchors that held us back anymore. Spring bloomed across Oakwood, and with it came a phone call from Sarah that I never could have anticipated. Her voice was electric with an idea she had been developing since that night at the support group, a video project. "Let's make a short documentary," she proposed, "to raise awareness for kids like Leo. We'll show the world what it's really like, the beautiful moments, the tough ones, all of it." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. The thought of putting our private life on public display was daunting, but the potential to shift perceptions, to make people see my son the way I did, was too powerful to ignore. My heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve, I agreed. To tell the story properly, we needed old photos, which meant a trip I had been dreading, a visit to my sister's house. I drove to Isabel's immaculate home on the other side of Oakwood, my daughter Chloe sitting quietly in the passenger seat. The 20-minute drive felt like an hour, with Chloe engrossed in her phone while I death-gripped the steering wheel. Isabel was the self-appointed family historian, with boxes of old albums and snapshots from a time before Leo's differences became an inconvenience. I hadn't exchanged a single word with her since the summer party fallout, and the thought of facing her made my stomach churn. But those photos were essential to illustrating Leo's journey, so I steeled myself and went. Isabel's house was just like her, pristine, orderly, and cold. I knocked, expecting her to answer, but instead the door was opened by her teenage son, Dylan. The smirk on his face was instantaneous, his eyes flicking from me to Chloe. "Oh, here for another round of the special kid show," he sneered, his voice dripping with the casual cruelty of a teenager who has learned his prejudices at home. The comment was a fresh cut, a painful reminder of the battle I was in. But before I could even form a response, Chloe stepped forward, her small frame radiating a sudden, immense power. "Don't you ever talk about my brother like that?" she snapped, her glare so fierce it actually made him recoil. A wave of fierce pride washed over me. My daughter, not even a teenager yet, was standing taller and stronger than I had for years. Dylan just shrugged, mumbled an incoherent reply, and shuffled away. A moment later, Isabel appeared, her expression a blank mask. She handed me a dusty cardboard box. "Take what you need," she said, her voice clipped and devoid of any warmth or inquiry. I simply nodded, avoiding her eyes, took the box, and we left. It felt strangely heavy in my arms. In the car, Chloe was fuming, her righteous anger a perfect mirror of my own. "Why do they always act like Leo is a problem?" she asked, her voice trembling. I squeezed her hand, not having a simple answer, but I knew with absolute certainty that my children would not be the ones to carry this shame. Back home, I spread the contents of the box across our kitchen table. There was Leo's early life staring back at me, his first gummy smile, his clumsy, triumphant first steps, moments of pure joy that my family had since tried to edit from their memory. Each image was a drop of fuel on the fire of my resolve. Sarah came over, her infectious energy filling the room as we sorted through the snapshots. "These are perfect," she said, holding up a photo of Leo, his head thrown back in pure, uninhibited laughter at the park. I nodded, seeing not just my son, but a universal story that had the power to change hearts and minds. This video wasn't just for us anymore. It was for every family fighting to have their child seen and valued. We began to map out the project, planning scenes that would capture the full spectrum of Leo's life, his dedicated work in therapy sessions, his intense, quiet focus as he built intricate structures with his blocks, his sudden, world-stopping hugs. I wanted the world to see him as I saw him, a whole person, not a diagnosis or a burden. Chloe insisted on being involved, suggesting we include her own perspective. "I want people to know he's my brother," she said firmly, "not just some issue." Her words echoed her powerful defense of him at Isabel's house, and I realized how much she had been growing in the shadows of this conflict, her own fire kindling alongside mine. The encounter with Dylan had been the final push I needed. It hadn't demoralized me. It had sharpened my focus. I called Sarah that night, my voice resolute. "Let's speed this up. Let's film next week." She agreed, sensing the urgency in my tone. I wasn't just making a video anymore. I was reclaiming my son's narrative, proving to my family and the world that Leo belonged. Dylan's sneer had backfired spectacularly. It hadn't broken our spirit. It had forged it into something stronger, and Chloe's courage had sealed it, proving that we, as a unit, were more powerful than their prejudice. Mark joined the team, volunteering to be our cameraman. His steady, quiet presence was my anchor as we prepped. I sifted through the photos one last time, carefully selecting the ones that radiated Leo's light, not the shadows my family had tried to cast on him. Isabel's coldness and Dylan's cruelty would not be the authors of our story. I looked at Chloe, her eyes shining with purpose, and I knew this video would carry her voice as much as mine. We were a team. By the weekend, our plan was solid. Sarah had booked a small local studio, and I wrote a script that didn't just tell our story, but wove it into a larger tapestry of love and resilience. I didn't shy away from the painful parts, the rejection, the isolation, but I framed them as obstacles we had overcome together. The video was becoming our declaration of independence. I looked at my daughter, a fierce warrior in the making, and I felt a fundamental shift inside me. This was no longer just about fighting back. It was about building something new. My family's choices had tried to diminish us, but instead they had forced us into the light, and we were ready to let our story be seen, no matter who was watching. 2 weeks before the Oakwood Regional Education Conference, I sealed 3 crisp, heavy envelopes. Inside were formal invitations addressed to my mother, Eleanor, my father, Richard, and my sister, Isabel. I had spent days drafting the accompanying letters, choosing each word with surgical precision. I invited them to the conference where my speech and the premiere of our video about Leo's life were set to be a main event. It was a public stand I had never imagined taking, and as I dropped the letters into the blue mailbox, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the irreversible weight of my actions. Back home, I obsessed over the speech, tweaking phrases at the kitchen table while the kids slept. The video was in its final stages, a powerful tapestry of Leo's laughter and struggles, interwoven with Chloe's unwavering voice declaring her love for her brother. It was our family's truth, captured in high definition. Mark read my final draft, his simple nod, a silent promise of his full support. My hope was that the conference would be a catalyst for change, showing other parents and educators that children like Leo deserve more than tolerance. They deserve celebration. But as the days ticked by, a cold dread began to creep in, not about the message, but about the personal cost of laying our story bare. My brother Nathan was the first to call. His voice was strained, walking a tightrope of feigned concern. "Ava, don't blow this up," he pleaded. "Mom is already a wreck." I gripped the phone, my jaw clenching. He was playing his lifelong role, the family diplomat, the one who patched over the cracks to preserve the illusion of a happy family. "This isn't about her, Nathan," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "This is about Leo." He let out a long, weary sigh, muttered something about the importance of keeping family matters private, and then hung up. The call was a painful reminder of the misplaced loyalty I had once felt. Eleanor's call came a few hours later. Her tone was not pleading, it was ice. "If you go public with this, you will shame this entire family," she stated, her voice a low threat. "You will drag our name through the mud." Her words struck a nerve, echoing the deepest fear I had been trying to bury, the fear of being the one who finally broke the family. I paced the living room, her threat echoing in my mind. Was she right? Was I about to cause irreparable damage? But then I thought of Leo, of his small hand holding mine, of the years he had been quietly pushed to the side. The shame wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. I sat back down, my speech scattered across the table. The conference was my chance to rewrite Leo's story for good, but it meant severing the ties to the only family I had ever known. I pictured Dylan's sneer, Isabel's cold dismissal, the photo albums that had been edited to erase my son. Their rejection was a chronic condition, a sickness I had allowed to fester for far too long. Nathan wanted peace, and Eleanor wanted control, but what Leo needed was a champion. I could no longer be silent, not when I had seen with my own eyes how much that silence cost him. Mark found me staring at the pages, lost in thought. "You're doing the right thing," he said, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. I nodded, but the fear still lingered. What if Eleanor's threat came true? What if I burned every bridge? Then I thought of Chloe, of her fierce defense of her brother at Isabel's house, and of the parents at the support group who had shared my pain. This wasn't just for Leo, it was for all of them, for every family that was fighting to be heard. I picked up my pen, the last vestiges of doubt fading as I added the final powerful lines to my speech. The video needed one last touch. I called Sarah, my rock throughout this entire process. We filmed a new closing scene, Leo at the park, his face alight with pure, unscripted joy as he chased a butterfly. Over the shot, Chloe's voice narrated, clear and strong, "He's my brother, and he is everything." Watching the final cut, a wave of certainty washed over me. This was bigger than my family's objections. This was a truth they couldn't silence or crop out. Isabel never responded to her invitation, her silence a predictable, resounding verdict. Nathan's call had been a plea for my silence, Eleanor's a threat to enforce it, but neither had swayed me. I had spent my life trying to fit into their narrow definition of family, softening my own edges to keep a peace that was never real. No more. Leo's life was not a family scandal to be hidden away. It was a story that deserved to be shared. The conference loomed, its potential consequences both daunting and liberating. I practiced my speech in front of the mirror, each line a step toward reclaiming our narrative. Mark and Chloe were my small, dedicated audience, their pride a silent source of strength. Eleanor's threat still echoed in a small, dark corner of my mind, but it was drowned out by a louder, stronger voice, my own. The video was finished, my speech was polished, and I was done hiding. I placed the final draft in a folder, my heart steady. This wasn't about tearing my family down, it was about lifting my son up. Their shame was not my burden to carry. I had chosen my son, and that choice was carrying me forward. The night of the conference, I stood backstage at the Oakwood Convention Center, my heart hammering against my ribs. The low hum of the packed auditorium filtered through the heavy curtain, a sea of educators, parents, and community members. My speech was a crumpled ball in my clammy hand, and the video was cued, ready to unleash our family's carefully guarded truth. Mark squeezed my arm, his steady presence the only thing keeping me grounded. Chloe stood beside me, her eyes shining with a fierce pride that belied her years. As the host introduced me, I took one last look at the crowd and saw them. In the third row, sitting stiffly together, were Eleanor, Richard, and Isabel. Their faces were unreadable stone masks. I walked to the podium, momentarily blinded by the harsh glare of the spotlight. My voice trembled on the first few words, but then I found my rhythm. I recounted the story of the summer party ban and my father's biting, drunken voicemail, the words feeling raw and loud in the vast, silent room. I was exposing wounds I had spent a lifetime trying to hide. I spoke of Leo's light, his unique way of seeing the world, his sudden, all-encompassing hugs, and the quiet agony of watching a family refuse to see his worth. My gaze flickered to Eleanor, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. But I didn't falter. I pressed on. Then the video began to play, filling the large screens on either side of the stage with the vibrant tapestry of Leo's life. There were clips of his triumphant laughter, his frustrating struggles with communication, and finally Chloe's powerful narration over the image of her brother chasing a butterfly. He's my brother, and he is everything. The final words were met with soft sobs and a few audible gasps from the audience. I watched my family waiting for any reaction, a flicker of regret, a hint of shame, but they remained perfectly still, their eyes fixed on the stage, their silence a solid, impenetrable wall. It was a reaction I hadn't fully anticipated, but one I no longer needed to breach. As the session ended and applause filled the hall, a woman with a purposeful stride approached me. "I'm from a national education advocacy group," she said, her face glowing. "We would be honored to share your video. It needs to be seen by families everywhere." I could only nod, stunned, as Mark and Chloe beamed at my side. By the next morning, her promise had come true. The video was online and it was spreading like wildfire across social media. Its message of love and acceptance was igniting conversations I had only dreamed of. Complete strangers filled the comments section, thanking us for our vulnerability and sharing their own deeply personal stories. A community was forming in real time, a community I had been longing for. But with the support came the inevitable fallout. My phone began buzzing relentlessly. 10 missed calls from Eleanor and Richard. Their voicemails were a stark contrast to their previous silence. "We need to talk, Ava," my mother's voice pleaded, cracking with a hollow, urgent desperation. My father's message was even softer, laced with a tone I had never heard from him before. "Please, let's just sort this out." I listened to them, a knot tightening in my chest, but their words felt empty, meaningless. They had been given years to talk, years to see Leo for who he was, and they had chosen silence. Now, with the eyes of the Oakwood community upon them, they were desperate for my mercy. I sat at my desk, the phone silenced, and opened my laptop. I typed a single email addressed to both of them. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained just 10 words. "If you want to talk, you can apologize to Leo." I hit send, my resolve firm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. My son deserved more than a panicked, self-serving appeal for forgiveness, sparked by public shaming. The community's reaction was immediate and decisive. Old friends, neighbors, even distant relatives reached out. Some praised my courage, while others whispered about my family's sudden public fall from grace. Posts on local online forums called out Eleanor and Richard by name. their rejection of their grandson now a permanent stain on their reputation. Isabel's silence drew its own form of condemnation, her public absence from the narrative just as damning as their actions. I took no joy in their exposure, but I did nothing to shield them from it. They had made their choices, and now Oakwood saw them for what they were. Mark and I talked late into the night, his hand holding mine. "You gave him a voice, Ava," he said, his pride in me a powerful anchor. Chloe, who had been pretending to be asleep, came into the room and hugged me tight, her quiet strength a constant reminder of why I had started this fight. The video's reach continued to grow, shared by schools, advocacy groups, and thousands of parents who saw their own struggles in our story. Each view, each share, felt like another brick in a new, more compassionate world. I no longer carried the weight of my family's silence. The conference had been my line in the sand, and I had crossed it without looking back. Eleanor and Richard's calls stopped. My email remained unanswered, a final, definitive boundary drawn to protect my son. I looked out at our backyard where Leo was playing, his happy shouts cutting through the quiet evening air. The world was finally starting to see him now, not as a problem to be managed, but as a person to be loved. And that was more than enough. That summer, I watched Leo run through the sun-drenched grass of the park, his laughter a bright, clear sound that held more hope than I had ever allowed myself to feel. The months since the conference had completely reshaped our world, and I was now focused on building a secure future for both him and Chloe. I met with a sharp, compassionate lawyer in downtown Oakwood named Clara, and together we established a comprehensive trust fund for our children. We pored over the documents, creating a financial fortress that would ensure Leo's lifelong care and Chloe's future dreams were protected, no matter what. It felt like laying a new foundation, solid and unshakable, for the life we were determined to build. Oakwood had changed too. My family, Eleanor, Richard, and Isabel, seemed to fade from the community landscape. They receded from public events, their absence a quiet but clear admission of their social downfall. Whispers followed them when they were seen, their rejection of their own grandson now a permanent part of their public identity. I didn't wish for their ruin, but I didn't mourn their retreat either. Their choices had drawn the line, and I had chosen my children over their hollow approval. The same community that had once been their stage now rallied around us. We were invited to neighborhood picnics, school fundraisers, and town meetings. Their warmth was a stark, healing contrast to the years of my family's coldness. That spring, Leo started a new communication class, a small group led by a patient, insightful teacher who saw his boundless potential. I drove him twice a week, sitting in on the sessions, watching him practice sounds and form sentences, his focus a thing of beauty. Chloe often came with us, becoming his biggest cheerleader, their bond a radiant light that never dimmed. One golden afternoon at the park after class, Leo stopped by the swings, turned to me and said, his voice clear and deliberate, "I like this place, Mommy." It was a full, complex sentence, and it hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled, pulling him into a fierce hug. His words, so simple yet so monumental, were a milestone I had dreamed of, a victory that was entirely his. Mark was there, his grin stretching from ear to ear as he lifted Leo onto the swing. We stood together, watching our son soar, the moment sealing the profound truth we had fought so hard for. Leo was more than enough, just as he was. That night, I lay awake, replaying the sound of his voice, feeling the weight of years finally lifting from my shoulders. Every painful step, every difficult choice, every tear had led to this perfect, simple moment. I thought of the conference, the video's incredible reach, and I knew we had done more than just survive. We had built something new, something that was truly ours. We leaned into that new future, joining community efforts with a sense of purpose I'd never known. Mark and I began volunteering at a local resource center, helping other families navigate the same challenges we had faced. Chloe, inspired, led a project at her school to raise funds for inclusive playground equipment, her quiet confidence a force to be reckoned with. The community embraced us, not as a cause to be pitied, but as neighbors and friends. Their support was a constant reminder that we were not alone. I saw other parents at meetings, their eyes holding the same fears I once had, and I shared our story, hoping it would give them the strength it had given me. The shadow of my birth family still lingered, but it no longer had the power to chill me. Eleanor and Richard never replied to my email, their silence a final, pathetic choice. Isabel remained a distant, cold figure, her absence a gap I no longer felt the need to fill. I didn't hate them. I simply didn't need them. Their world, built on the fragile foundation of appearances, had crumbled under the weight of its own cruelty. For years, I had chased their acceptance, contorting myself to fit their rules. Now I stood tall, rooted in the rich, authentic life we had carved out for ourselves. Leo's progress was a series of small, miraculous steps that felt like giant leaps. His teacher sent home notes praising his effort, and I pinned each one to the fridge, a gallery of his resilience. Chloe grew too, her voice becoming stronger, her love for her brother a fierce, protective shield. Mark and I planned for the years ahead, not with fear, but with a newfound clarity. The trust fund was our safety net, but our real security lay in the community we had found and the love that bound our small family together. Looking back, I could see the true cost of my choices. I had lost the family I was born into, but I had gained a world where my children could truly thrive. The conference, the video, the email, they were all steps toward a truth I had learned the hard way. I had fought for Leo's place, not just in our home, but in a world that I now knew could change. And it was changing. One story, one voice, one sentence at a time. I stood in the park watching my son play, his words still echoing in my heart. I had chosen him, and in doing so, I had set us all free. For every parent watching their child wondering if they are enough, I want to say this: your love is the only voice that matters. It drowns out judgment, it builds futures, and it is worth every single fight. That is the lesson I learned, and that is the truth I will carry with me, always.